Last month, 55-year-old Sean Diddy Combs was convicted on 2 federal counts of prostitution-related offense linked to 2 ex-girlfriends, including Cassie Ventura, a key witness for the prosecution. But Combs was acquitted on the top charges of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy, avoiding the possibility of life in prison.
So, did Diddy do it? Yeah, he did it. But it's all about the Benjamins, baby.
Lead defense attorney Mark Agnifilo says he's now focused on Combs' sentencing day in October.
How are you preparing him?
So, I tell him what the guidelines are, and the guidelines are about 2 or 3 years. And I tell him, the judge could go above the guidelines.
So, as you guys know, the Diddy case is now over. I know a lot of people are upset because people didn't get the verdict they thought he deserved. I did a video on this prior. Actually, Diddy Do It was my first video I did on YouTube. That was my first video I uploaded. So if you get a second, check that out because, I said I was going to wait to respond on Diddy until the trial happens so we won't get caught up in the court of public opinion and all those things. So now that the trial's over, we kind of see what's going on. And he pretty much beat his case. All the main charges they charged him with that have cost him like his life, he beat those charges. And my personal opinion is, the verdict was correct. Because, the RICO stuff, they didn't prove that stuff. If you listen to the trial and the things they brought up and the people they brought to the stand, it didn't have anything to do with a RICO charge. Traditionally, RICO charges were put together by, I want to say J. Edgar Hoover. He was the head of the FBI, and the RICO charges were put together to take down the mafia, because a lot of times what would happen is the mafia have organized crime and they would have cells. So what would happen is, the cells wouldn't be connected. So you'll take down all the low level guys, but you'll never get to the boss because, the mafia families were broken up in divisions. So the RICO charge allowed you to arrest everybody. So even if you get the low level people, if you can prove that the low level people have any connection to the higher people, you get to lock those guys up too. So that was the RICO charge, and that was what it was initially put in place for. Now, when they came out with the RICO charge for Diddy, I'm waiting for the rest of the people because, like I said, in the mafia charge, the RICO means that, it's a lot of people involved. It's a criminal organization. And keep that in mind, criminal organization. A RICO charge can't be one person. So that was kind of weird. So when they brought that charge up, I'm thinking, oh, we're going to get Jay-Z. We're going to get all these other rappers. We're going to get these other entertainers. We're going to get all these other people. And when the thing with the trial, none of those names never came up. So I don't understand what the RICO charge was for if you wasn't going to bring up no additional names and no additional people. The RICO charge didn't make no sense. So, yeah. And then you got the trafficking charge, which, like I said, I don't think he trafficked anybody because on the statement, it looked like everybody was a willing participant. So, yeah, that's why I think that trafficking charge didn't stick. What a trafficking charge that'll get you, life in prison. That charge was a bad charge because, if you think about it, when I think of trafficking charge, I think of people getting taken in crates. I think people getting put in the back of trucks. I think of people coming in from Mexico and crossing the border and getting put in slave labor camps and stuff like that. When you say sex trafficking, right? That's what I think. I don't think prostitution or anything like that, or you paying for prostitutes. I think you're the person that's setting up the prostitution and setting up the prostitution ring. So that's what, when you say stuff like sex trafficking, that's what goes in my mind when people say that. And they didn't prove that with him. So that's another charge he didn't get. So the only thing left is, really was the prostitution charge, paying prostitutes. And that charge is okay, if you want to charge him with that, you can charge almost anybody, not anybody, but a lot of famous people do what he do. I'll just put it like that. You can't charge anybody because everybody don't pay for prostitutes. Everybody don't do that. But a lot of people fly women in. A lot of people, oh, I'm a flyer out. Women talk about it all the time. Oh yeah, he flew me out. This NBA player did this. This businessman did this. They flew me out to Vegas. They flew me out to Miami. All that stuff falls under this charge that he got, right? So this is going to change the game, because a lot of people who fly people out and do all that stuff, you have to watch yourself, because if they charging them for this, and depending on what they give them, yeah, that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. Another thing too, I want to talk about this charge too, is they're charging them. The official name of the charge is the Mann Act. Now, if you know anything about the Mann Act has a bad history, and I believe they're using this Mann Act the same way they used it on previous people, right? Because if you look at the history of the Mann Act was put in place because of Jack Johnson. And if you're familiar who Jack Johnson is, Jack Johnson was the first black heavyweight champion in the world. So, and Jack Johnson was a monster. If you read his stuff, if you look him up, man, Jack Johnson used to destroy people. And a lot of times what he would do is, he would get in fights with people, and of course, boxing matches with people, and they would try to find like some white person to beat him, and they couldn't beat him. And a lot of times he would punish the dude. Jack Johnson probably could have knocked a lot of his guys out in the first, second round, but he didn't. He would punish the guys. He would drag them out and drag the fight out and just punish the guy, because that's how he was, and because he was treated badly. They couldn't beat him in the ring. Like, he was destroying everybody. They had free falls. They had bare knuckle fights. They had all these things to try to stop him, but they couldn't stop him. So what they did was it became a political thing, because one thing that Jack Johnson liked white women. So in 1910, white people didn't want you with their women. That's just what it is. So they did was they came up with the Mann Act, and basically they were saying that, hey, you know what? He's trafficking women across borders. And then they eventually locked him up. Well, they tried to lock him up for a year, but he fled the country with his wife. And that's pretty much his story. Diddy is being charged with the Mann Act, which already has racist roots in it. So, I don't really like that. And actually, if you look up the term of the Mann Act, the original term is the White Slavery Act, which is funny. I mean, I don't understand what white slavery is, but I guess they just didn't want, people enslaving white people, which is ridiculous. But anyway, one of the reasons they said allegedly the law was put into place was to protect women from forced prostitution, which, like I said, Jack Johnson wasn't doing, because he was married with his wife. So it's just one of those things you got to think about when they charging for this stuff, because the key word is forced prostitution. And if you listen to the case, none of those people were forced to do anything. Well, at least the prostitutes weren't, I would say. You can argue whether Cassie was. You can argue back and forth. You can say, maybe in her situation, because, it was a position of power, she might have felt forced to do stuff. But I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm just going by what the testimony was given. I'm just going by what they said in court. And if Liz 2 was in court, it don't sound like anybody was forced to do anything. Everybody willingly participated in what was going on. Now, the stuff that I think they should have done with Diddy is they should have charged him for other stuff, right? Because I remember when they first had the case, they said that the baby oil that he was using was laced with ketamine. So where's that charge? I'm pretty sure drugging is a charge that you can be charged for. They also said he had guns that had scratched off serial numbers. Now, I don't know what state Diddy was in. I don't know what state he lives in. But if any of you guys know, tell me what state you can be in with scratched off serial numbers. I know the ATF don't play that stuff, so I don't understand why he wasn't charged for those weapons without the serial numbers on them. I remember too, they said something about him having tunnels under his house. What were those tunnels used for? Why we didn't see the pictures of them, I don't understand. Because that would have helped the case for trafficking, right? If you got tunnels under your house, you moving something under there. So that's another thing to think about. Like, why wasn't that being used in the case? It was a lot of things I think they just didn't charge him for. And the last thing they didn't charge him for was the assault of his wife, because he beat up Cassie. But that one's kind of tricky, because I remember the other case with Bill Cosby. You remember a few years ago, to Bill Cosby, he initially went to jail for his case, but when they went back and looked at it, and when he appealed, they found out that they used testimony from his civil case and his criminal case. And for some reason, you can't do that. So all the testimony he used in his civil case, they had to throw out of the criminal case, which pretty much let Bill Cosby come home. Cassie already settled a civil case for $20 million. So all the evidence in the civil case, she may not be able to use in the criminal case. So he may not get charged for, the abuse that he did with her. So the abuse that he performed on her. So that's another thing you have to really think about too when we talk about the criminal charge on that aspect. So but other than that, like I said, I mean, this doesn't really change my perspective on Diddy. I still think Diddy's a bad person. I think Diddy's a monster. I think Diddy just does terrible things. I mean, it doesn't change my perspective on him. But in a criminal setting, when we talk about locking somebody up for the rest of their life, you really need to prove that he's doing these things for you to do that, right? I don't want no wishy-washy, no watered down proof, no hearsay. No. Y'all the feds, y'all got the resources. If he's doing this, prove that he's doing it without a reasonable doubt, and then lock him up. But if it's hearsay and all that stuff, like I said, I don't think you should be locking anybody up for the rest of their life if you're not 100% certain that they're doing those things. Well, that's just my thoughts on that. Guys, let me know what you think. I can go on about this, but thank you guys for listening. Check out some of my other videos. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy.